Alright, so we're going to be doing, this video is for the public speaking and argumentation courses. It can also be for political science. I can use it for maybe some extra credit because this goes over policy. In communication studies, we call it persuasion, and we call speech patterns that fit policy decisions problem solution. But this is what we're talking about. So political science can use it, but more importantly, public speaking and argumentation. This is about, I'm doing too many ums. This is about persuasion speeches and setting up for it with problem solution speech pattern. Now, this video will cover a lot of different things that is being missed in the lecture and this our current surroundings, so please watch through the entire video. But before I begin, there's two things. The COVID-19 suggestion. We're going into possible reopening in some areas. Be cautious, be concerned, and be safe. Wear mask, mask, mask. I don't care what people do and say. Anyone says it's not masculine or cool. You know, I served in the Marine Corps, and I hope someone says that to me. Just to tell you how much I disagree with that. Because the fact of the matter is, it's about responsibility. And the World War II generation did not complain when they had the ration, scrap, draft, and all the stuff they had to go through, and we're just having to put on masks. Wear a mask. Be better than the people who are saying not to. Hey, and also, businesses can look at the past for possible solutions. I've suggested electronic stores and home video stores. They used to have their products like auto part dealerships where they would have catalogs and stuff on the counter and people would request the items. That's something that could be a possibility in the immediate future. Setting up counters and staff goes and gets the products. That's a possibility for a retail outlet. So you can see balancing out. That's the thing. Okay, enough of that stuff. I'm set up in front of this, one of my favorite, I love black and white photography. This is one of my favorites, and I get a lot of flack for it. Because, so I'm going to talk, it's Ruth Orkin's American Girl in Italy, done in 1951. People are upset with it because it stereotypes Italians, and it shows her being the woman being harassed. And I completely understand that. I completely understand. But you have to also know something else about this photo. It's completely fake. Everything, all these people in it, it's all set up. That's why I have two prints right here of an earlier shot of this narrative, this story, and them actually setting up for this scene. And the reason why I love this photo so much, not just for the photography aspect, is the setup. And that's what a persuasion is. That is what problem solution is. You are setting up people for them to believe what you want them to do. You're telling people what to do. You're telling them we need to take this action in your solution, or we need to believe a certain thing. With problem solution, it's more to do. Cause and effect is more believe. This one is to do. And any of my persuasion speeches, in argumentation or public speaking, you are doing problem solution speech pattern. Now, before we begin, introduction to persuasion speaking. In my public speaking courses, you've heard me talk about informative speaking being like telling everyone all the food options. When you're hanging out with your friends, all the food options you can go to. You're laying them all out and giving information on all the different options. In persuasion, you're telling them where to go. You're telling them where you want to eat or which is the best place for you to eat. That is persuasion. If you've heard me talk about thesis, I believe thesis should be direct statements like, we need to do this. This is the best way. I'm here to inform you. That's what a persuasion is. A direct statement. And the best example of that persuasion in general is asking somebody out on a date. You're asking them to, oh, by the way, I'm wearing my debate kittens shirt. Clearance at Target. Anyways, you're telling them to go out. You're telling them to go out with you to see the town, take up action of going out with you. That is persuasion. You're getting them to do something or believe in something. Making sure. Oh, that's just a shadow, right? Oh, that's just a shadow. I have clothes up here. I don't want them to be on stage. All right, enough of that. All right, so that's what persuasion is. The first thing you need to understand is this is what we call a problem solution speech pattern. The best way to do it for you, for your first persuasion, is problem, problem, solution. Your main point 1 is talking about the problem. Main point 2, talking a bit more about the problem in a different way, maybe more specific or so forth. And then main point 3, your solution. That's it. Now, if the problem is huge and vast and your solution is entirely new, you would do something like problem, solution, solution. That's an option. Not for you, but I'm going to just give you an example to put it out there. For this COVID-19 situation and reopening schools, I'm an advocate for going after the digital divide. Just like we have the cafeteria and them giving food to kids who need help in that area, we can open up a large room for a computer lab situation with social distancing and a lot of practices to protect them, because students need a timeout area to get away from everything and enclosed space and help. So that's a possible solution. That would be that kind of situation. This is not that kind of speech. Your speech is going to be, you need to talk about the problem, and then your solution. I don't want you to go too in depth with the solution because it could be ominous. Some people get a little fearful of the solution part, and we'll get into that more in detail. But the most important thing for you is to make sure your speech pattern for your persuasion speech is problem, problem, solution. All right. That goes into how to impress people with your setup. You're trying to get them to do something, and the best way to explain it is you got to go with the facts. And if you're in public speaking and you did your informative speech, you know the importance of credibility and references. That's the same thing with persuasion. You got to bring the facts. And so, for example, you need to present to them, checking the time, yep, we're good. You got to present to them a reasonable facts that they might already establish. So, for example, in one of my earlier videos in public speaking, I might have used it for argumentation too. I talked about informative speeches and oh yeah, I did. I gave it to everybody. The possibility of variation in what you believe in, and I talked about AP classes. Just to reiterate, again, this is just an opinion. I'm not telling you need to believe in it. I'm just showing you what an opinion is because I want you to develop your own. Enough of that. My opinion is that AP classes, if this was a perfect world, we wouldn't have AP education anymore. That's a persuasion. Me saying that is a persuasion. Now, of course, tuition's too high and we need to offset the cost of tuition, and AP courses, unfortunately, is one of the ways. But if I was making a persuasion about getting rid of AP classes, there's a couple things I could do that are facts are kind of commonly known. Like, for example, some states have messed with AP classes and what is taught. That's a fact that's widely reported in several newspapers and articles. I could talk about facts that are kind of commonly known, that AP courses are not taught by professors and don't have the equivalency, and that could be looked at by standards and practices of the local community college or CSU or UC or wherever you're at. There's a lot of things that are facts that you can just extrapolate tuition costs and all that stuff that is known. But what is not known is when you introduce things that might be able to shock people. So, for example, AP courses might have a factor in why tuition costs are so high, because not as many classes are being taught that should be taught. Meaning, if they're skipping on classes, they're not paying for those classes. So that means there's less classes at the campus that students are taking, or required to take. That means they got to get their money from what classes are being taught. Now that's an extrapolation. Those facts are not widely out there, but that's a argumentation that you can make. You have a couple facts to show that, and show maybe there's that variation, and you're introducing new information. So you can bring up stuff that's kind of commonly known and is seen, but you can use stuff that's already seen and make arguments that are not commonly known. It's kind of surprising your audience. It's just something to keep in mind. That's one area. The next area is a little personal here. What am I saying? I'm using my my place for my background. But I'm from Fresno, California, and yes, students make fun of the fact that I always mention my hometown. But the fact of the matter is, there is something that Fresno was leading the world on. Leading the world on. And was the #1 city in the world on this issue. Above New York, LA, San Francisco, Paris, London, Tokyo. Fresno, California was above all those places. Well, what was the issue? Recycling. Now this is, I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is actually a big deal. There was a time that Fresno, California, my hometown, 5th largest city in California by the way, was leading the world on recycling per citizen and all that. It's very specific information. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is Fresno is not known for being environmentalist. It's the red part of California. So the idea of Fresno, the red part of California, leading on an environmental issue in the world is kind of weird. But what happened was Fresno was, and by the way, I know this because this happened during my time in Fresno. Fresno tried a recycling program that failed. They had these bins that you were supposed to separate your garbage and put them all these different places, and then they come by and so forth. It was inefficient, and people didn't do as much because it was work for them to put the recycling in separate bins and separate. Fresno is low income, low education. It has a very low opinion of government and government offices. It's a red area of California. And what they decided to do was new for everybody, was they said, you know what, we can't have the bins. We'll just have them put whatever they think is recycling in the one bin. We'll have the garbage bin, and then we'll have another one, green grass. That's easy to understand, you know, clippings and so forth. And it worked. It worked well. And people are, if you're watching this, they're like, well, my area does that. That's true. And you got to thank Fresno for that. They were the leader in other cities and other major metropolitan areas, other companies. You go to a lot of these big box stores or these theme parks, and a lot of them do the stuff that Fresno started. They don't have separate things for different parts of trash. They don't ask you to separate. They just said recycling here, regular trash here, and we'll do it for you. That is a problem solution idea. You look at the situation that you're trying to figure out, and you decide which one is best. You don't come up with the thing that probably won't work. You come up with the idea that would be work in best environment, and that will get more people, your audience. Now, I'm not asking you to create policy or whatever, but there will be things you read and look up that has different solution ideas. And just think about where you're trying to place it in your audience and figure out, just like they did in my hometown, what is the best thing that works with this group. And you never know. It might be something that persuades people to think what you're thinking. So, that's a long explanation. Usually, by the way, when I do that part, we go back and forth and so forth. But that leads into the final area. So forth. That leads into the area. What kind of solutions should you use? Fresno was an example where they came up with a problem solution. I'm not asking you to find something on your own or create something on your own, but find something that would work for you and what you think would work. Other people have ideas. You can take it as long as you credit them and do proper citation. But it needs to be practical. What if I told you here in the city of Los Angeles we can eliminate a good percentage of smog emissions like that? Just 5-10% of smog emissions gone like that. We don't have to change how we drive. We just, no more, we're not pushing people on the buses. There's just one little thing, we'll change it like that. Sounds like a good idea, right? But then you find out that little idea is shutting down all drive-through windows in the city of Los Angeles. The place that created the drive-through window. Or popularized it, I should say. It might have been some place in Oink and Boink that did something, I don't know. Anyways, that would not work. There is no way Los Angeles tomorrow, especially in this situation, but this example was thought of before the pandemic. There's no way they're going to change that lifestyle in Los Angeles like that. So you got to think of a solution, or find a solution that's more practical. Something that will be more efficient, would work in the environment. But there's one solution I never allow in my speeches, and I will say this in our Zoom meetings and so forth. Awareness. Awareness never works. As someone who's worked in policy and worked in things, awareness is a good idea, but awareness does jack. It does not work. You need real solutions, change laws, spend money, increase taxes, lower taxes, change regulations, stuff like that. The only time awareness works is when the subject is very hard to talk about. As someone who has worked with domestic violence victims, some things that we need to address, awareness would work in certain situations, but it has to be extreme. And usually, basic awareness doesn't work. So be understanding. I remember, by the way, I remember one thing after this. Be understanding that awareness is usually not the solution. It makes you feel good, but when it comes down to it, unless you change something dramatically, awareness takes a lot of time and usually does not work. So what works? Well, as someone who's worked in messaging, the best solutions are the ones that goes into the person's self-interest. This is where I talk about my past. I worked with Democratic politicians, and one thing I will tell you right now is when it comes to my side of the equation, they're really horrible about messaging. And this is what I want to leave you with for your possible solutions. I know this was a long video, but you've been in my lecture, so you understand. These things, what you're trying to push people, if you go into their self-interest more. So for example, on my side of the equation, when they talk about save the environment, they say save the trees, save the wells. I'm not a tree, I'm not a well. You need to talk about things. You save the trees because you want to save our breathable air so I can live. That's how you go after self-interest. You go after that. The one thing I always, I'm checking my time. The one thing I always said about the other side of the equation, even though the policies don't work, they always sold it that goes after self-interest, like tax cuts. I don't want to talk about it, but they never work. They're a myth. Anyways, but the fact is, oh, I'm going to have more money in my pocket sounds good, even though most of the time that doesn't really work, or it never happens. But it sounds good. So when you think about persuasion and persuading people to believe what you want to believe, the best way to do that is to go after their self-interest. And when you're coming up with the problems for your problem solution, you think about what's affecting people the most. What is hitting their self-interest the most? And when you think about solution, what is the thing that they might think about the most? Their safety, their pocketbook, their ability to live in liberties and all that stuff. Because when it comes to persuasion and problem solution, the best solutions, the best persuasion is when people connect with it. And so that is your discussion question for public speaking and argumentation, and even political science. Whatever you're trying to advocate, whatever persuasion, solution, policy you're advocating for, I want you to say it in a sentence, and then a sentence or two underneath it, just come up with the best way to sell it that goes on to their self-interest. I'll talk about it in detail, but for those who are doing the journal option because of this situation, that's what you need to do. Alright, this has been a long video. And this is a lot of stuff to content, and there's another video for this section too. So have a good day and stay safe. It is a good fit photo, by the way.